There's a third component that's critically important for us as educators. I got so excited when this research came out just a few years ago because it suddenly made so much sense in terms of learning. And that's represented by the center, where you have a film projector. Why a film projector? If you think about film montage, if you see a man walking down a street and he looks in a store window and the next thing you see is him walking out of that store with a bag, your brain puts together the pieces and says, oh, I understand that that man went in and bought whatever was in that store window. That's like the episodic buffer component of working memory. The episodic buffer engages our brain in blending. Falconier and Turner call this conceptual blending, where we are blending, and this is important, we are blending the new and the known. We're blending the new and the known. And here's something critically important for us as teachers. Don't miss this. You only can construct understanding when you blend the new and the known. You only can construct understanding when you blend the new and the known. What in the world do I mean by that? There are things that I know that I don't understand. Black holes in space. I know that they exist. That's where my understanding, which is not even understanding, which is where my knowledge ends. Why? Because I've never had black holes in space explained to me in such a way that I'm able to trace back through my memories and go, oh, it's like this in some way. And it's only when the brain can go, oh, this new stuff is like this old stuff, that we go, oh, and we understand the new. So if you want students to understand concepts that you're teaching, you must engage them in this blending. Now, one way to do this, one way to get at this, engage students in comprehension, is to have them work with data visually. Graphic organizers are great for engaging students in comprehension. Why? 70% of your brain's sensory receptors are devoted to vision. I don't care whether you think you're a kinesthetic learner, an auditory learner, your brain has a real strong inclination toward vision. And visual processing, actually organizing ideas out here where I can see them, works really well in terms of helping us sort and label that new data. Let's go on. Okay, so I'm teaching along, I've engaged them in some comprehension, you've talked about this blending, what do I do next? That brings us to elaboration, which brings me back to my kindergarten days. Mrs. Ireland was my kindergarten teacher. Mrs. Ireland, don't miss this, this is really amazing. Mrs. Ireland knit matching hat and mittens for every one of her students for Christmas, and we all had different patterns. I should add that Mrs. Ireland retired after that year. I'm not sure there's a correlation, but the timing is rather interesting. But Mrs. Ireland loved art, and she would say, okay, boys and girls, go get one of your father's old dress shirts. It's time for art. And she would give us these sheets of what she called white construction paper. Now, I'm so old that white construction paper wasn't really white. It was the color of manila folders, and it had dark brown flecks through it. That was white construction paper back before they invented white construction paper. And Mrs. Ireland would get all excited and she'd say, boys and girls, I'm gonna walk around and I'm gonna give each of you, and these were her words, I can remember this, a dollop of blue paint. And she would walk around and she would give each of us a little dollop of blue paint in the corner of that white construction paper. And then we were free to use our God-given, God-created paintbrushes, our fingers, to start spraying that blue paint across the paper. And then she'd come back to the front and say, oh, boys and girls, it's even more exciting now. I'm going to give you a dollop of yellow paint. She'd walk around, she'd give each of us a dollop of yellow paint, and she was right. It was magic. Now we could have blue, and we could have yellow, and we could have green. Elaborations like that. Think about the blue being the new material. This is the new information you are teaching me, hoping that I will learn. That yellow dollop of paint is my past experience. The green represents understanding. I only can get to understanding by bringing the dollops together. I can only get to understanding by merging, by blending the new and the known. What are some ways to engage students in elaboration? Having them identify similarities and differences is one way. This is a time where you say to students, okay, we've been talking about this. We've been talking, this is a goofy example, but I think you'll get the point. We've been talking about the water cycle. Everybody think about the water cycle for a minute. What are some of the things we've talked about? Okay, now, everybody think about the cafeteria tray system in our cafeteria. How is the water cycle like the cafeteria tray system, and you can't say that they both use water? Beyond that, think beyond. What connections? See, it's not that we're after this wonderful list of connections from each student. It's not the product we're after, it's the process. It's engaging them in that thinking of, okay, how is this new stuff like this thing I know? It's those connections. When we make those connections, that we're able to construct understanding. Another way that you can engage students in elaboration is changing the form. Simply changing the form. What do I mean by that? We do a lot of talking. We have students do a lot of reading. One of the ways to engage them in elaboration is to say to them, present this information in some other form. Again, a goofy example, but I think you'll get the point. Let's say that you're teaching something like the American Revolution in social studies, and you talk at length about 3 groups of people. You talk about patriots, loyalists, and Quakers. And you say to students, tonight for homework, I want you to identify a theme song for each of those 3 groups. You may write your own theme song if you feel creative. You may identify a theme song. Something you've heard on the radio is fine as long as it's appropriate. Okay? But you have to identify a theme song that you think captures the perspective of each of those 3 groups. Look what you've asked me to do. You've said to me, you know about these 3 groups. You've got knowledge of these 3 groups. Search through your experience. Find something in your experience that connects to these new ideas. You've engaged me in elaboration. And I love these activities because isn't it fascinating what students come up with? I mean, when a student comes up and says, well, for the Quakers, I chose that country song, I Hope You Dance. And you're like, I have no idea what the connection is going to be, but I can't wait to hear it. It's that process of blending. Something about that song, you know, their experience with it sparked something that connects with that new idea, that concept, and that's where the understanding gets constructed. So you're teaching along and you say, oh my goodness, I've been talking for this long, I need to have a little downtime, what are some things I can do? Engage them in some graphic organizers, engage them in identifying similarities and differences, and have them change the